Story 1. The truck stop that only exists at night. The Flying J at mile marker 214 on I-90 in Montana materialized out of fog at 11:43 p.m. like a mirage. But mirages don't have functioning diesel pumps and 24 trucks parked in neat rows with engines idling. I'd driven this route for 16 years. Twice monthly, same schedule, same stops, and there had never been a truck stop at mile marker 214. The nearest services were 30 miles in either direction. But my fuel gauge was kissing empty, my bladder was screaming, and the glowing sign promising hot coffee and clean restrooms looked like salvation in the November darkness. My name is Michael Torres, and I should have kept driving. The parking lot was too perfect. Every truck faced the same direction, parked with identical spacing, all of them running but no drivers visible in the cabs. The building itself looked modern, well-maintained, brightly lit, exactly like every other Flying J in America, which should have been my first warning. Corporations don't build travel plazas in the middle of nowhere without traffic studies and revenue projections. But desperate men don't question their luck. I pulled in, fueled up, and walked toward the entrance with my wallet and a profound sense of relief. The automatic doors opened smoothly. Inside was exactly what I expected. Aisles of snacks and supplies, a fast food counter, showers in the back, restrooms to the right. A tired-looking woman in a Flying J uniform stood behind the register, her name tag reading Susan. 3 other truckers browsed the aisles, picking up items, examining labels, moving with the slow deliberation of men who'd been driving too long. "Evening," Susan said, smiling. Her smile was pleasant, but didn't reach her eyes. "Fuel up okay?" "Yeah, thanks." I grabbed a coffee from the self-serve station, added a couple pre-wrapped sandwiches and a bag of chips. Standard road food. When I brought everything to the counter, Susan rang it up with mechanical efficiency. The total came to $23.47. I handed her a 20 and a 5. She gave me change. I pocketed it and headed toward the restroom. That's when I noticed the clock on the wall showed 11:43 p.m., the same time I'd arrived. I checked my watch, 11:51 p.m. 8 minutes had passed, but the wall clock insisted otherwise. I dismissed it as a broken clock and continued to the bathroom. The facilities were immaculate, too immaculate. The mirrors had no water spots, the floor showed no scuff marks. The toilet paper dispenser was full, but the roll showed no sign of use. It looked like a bathroom in a showroom, never actually used by human beings. I finished quickly, washed my hands, and walked back out to the main area. The same 3 truckers were in the same positions, examining the same items. One held a bag of beef jerky, reading the label with exaggerated concentration. Another stood in front of the cooler, hand on the door handle, frozen mid-reach, for a sports drink. The third was at the magazine rack, his finger tracing the spine of a trucking industry publication. "You guys okay?" I asked. They didn't respond, didn't even acknowledge I'd spoken. I walked closer to the man with the beef jerky, looked at his face. His eyes were open but unfocused, staring at the package without seeing it. His chest rose and fell with breath, but the movement was too regular, too mechanical, like an automaton approximating respiration. "Sir?" I touched his shoulder. His head turned toward me with smooth, motorized precision. His mouth opened. "This is good jerky," he said, his voice flat and toneless. "I purchase this brand frequently. The price is reasonable. The flavor is satisfactory. Are you all right?" "I am fine. This is good jerky. I purchase this brand frequently." The exact same words, exact same inflection. A recording playing back. His eyes remained unfocused, looking through me rather than at me. I backed away, my heart rate accelerating. Something was catastrophically wrong here. I turned toward the exit, walking quickly, ready to abandon my coffee and food and get back to my truck. But Susan was standing in front of the doors now, still smiling that empty smile. "Leaving so soon?" she asked. You just arrived at 11:43 p.m. Most drivers stay longer. Most drivers need rest. You look tired, Michael. I hadn't told her my name. How do you know? You're always tired when you arrive. 16 years of this route, twice monthly, and you're always tired. You should rest here. Sleep in one of our parking spots. It's safe, it's comfortable, it's where drivers stay. I tried to step around her. She moved to block me, her movements too fast, too fluid. You can't leave yet. You just arrived at 11:43 p.m. It's almost midnight. I've been here for 10 minutes. No. She pointed at the wall clock. Still 11:43. You just arrived. You're experiencing confusion. This happens to tired drivers. You should rest. I shoved past her, physically pushing through the doors. They resisted, closing against me, but I forced my way through and ran toward my truck. Behind me, I heard Susan's voice, no longer pleasant, no longer human. It sounded like multiple voices overlapping, a chorus speaking in perfect unison. You can't leave. You just arrived. It's 11:43. It's always 11:43. Stay. Rest. Become like the others. My truck was where I'd left it, but the keys weren't in my pocket. I'd left them in the ignition, standard practice when fueling at night, so you don't lock yourself out. I yanked the door open and climbed in. The keys were there. The engine was still running exactly as I'd left it. But the fuel gauge showed empty. Completely empty, despite having just filled the tank. The other trucks in the parking lot were moving now. Not driving, but rocking slightly on their suspensions, as if something inside each cab was shifting weight, preparing to emerge. Doors were opening, figures were climbing out, dozens of drivers, all moving in synchronization, all turning to face my truck. They walked toward me, not running, just walking with identical strides, identical pace. Their faces were slack, expressionless, eyes unfocused. They surrounded my truck, dozens of them, placing their hands on the sides, on the hood, on my door. Not trying to break in, just touching, feeling, as if trying to remember what the metal meant. One of them looked familiar. Bill Hendricks, a driver I'd known years ago. He'd disappeared in Montana, just never showed up for a delivery. Truck and trailer found abandoned at a rest area with no sign of him. That was 7 years ago. But here he was, looking exactly as I remembered, wearing the same clothes he'd been wearing in the missing person reports. "Bill," I said through the closed window. His head tilted, his mouth moved. "This is a good truck. I drove trucks frequently. The job was satisfactory. The pay was reasonable." The same flat tone, the same mechanical delivery. He wasn't Bill anymore. He was something wearing Bill's shape, speaking Bill's words without understanding them. I threw my truck into gear and hit the accelerator. The figures didn't try to stop me, just moved aside with coordinated precision, opening a path. I drove toward the exit, watching my mirrors, expecting pursuit. None came. The truck stop remained brightly lit behind me, the figures standing motionless in the parking lot, watching me leave. A quarter-mile down the highway, I checked my mirrors again. The truck stop was gone. Just darkness, empty prairie, no lights anywhere. I looked at my GPS, no Flying J listed at mile marker 214. I checked my fuel gauge, 3/4 full, exactly where it had been before I stopped. My wallet was light. I checked inside. The $20 and $5 I'd given Susan were missing, but I had no receipt, no coffee, no sandwiches. The transaction had happened, but the evidence suggested otherwise. Except for one thing. In my cup holder sat a keychain I'd never seen before, a Flying J logo attached to a small plastic tag with numbers stamped into it. 11:43. I threw it out the window and drove until sunrise, refusing to stop, refusing to even slow down until I was 300 miles away. But at every truck stop I've visited since, I see them. The drivers with unfocused eyes, the ones who move a little too mechanically, who speak in flat tones, who examine the same items without purchasing, who stand in the same positions for too long. They're everywhere now. Or maybe they always were and I just never noticed. Maybe that truck stop at mile marker 214 isn't an anomaly. Maybe it's a factory processing drivers, converting them into something else, then releasing them back into the travel plaza ecosystem to blend in and wait. Wait for what? I don't know. But I see Bill Hendricks sometimes at different truck stops across Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, always examining beef jerky, always saying the same words in the same tone. A recording that will play forever, stuck at 11:43 p.m., stuck in that moment when he stopped being human and became something that approximates a truck driver without understanding what one is. Last week I saw myself. At a pilot in North Dakota, I walked past a man who had my face, my build, my exact clothing. He was standing in front of the coffee station, hand on the pot handle, frozen mid-pour. I watched for 5 minutes. He didn't move, didn't blink, didn't finish pouring, just stood there experiencing 11:43 p.m. forever. I don't know if that was a future version of me or a version from a timeline where I didn't escape that night. But I know the truck stops are watching for me now. I know they want me back. I know that somewhere on I-90 in Montana at mile marker 214, a flying J materializes every night at 11:43, and Susan stands behind the register with her empty smile, waiting for me to return. The keychain I threw away keeps reappearing. In my cab, in my bag, in my pockets. Always the same one, always showing 11:43. I throw it away again and it returns. Eventually I'll run out of fuel at exactly the wrong moment. Eventually I'll be desperate enough to stop at whatever appears. Eventually it will be 11:43 p.m. at mile marker 214, and this time I won't leave. This time I'll become like the others. Standing in the same position forever, examining the same items, speaking the same words, stuck in a moment that never ends. The truck stop that only exists at night is waiting. It has infinite patience. It has all the time in the world. And it's always 11:43. Story 2, The Hitchhiker Who Ages in Reverse. She looked 70 years old when I picked her up outside Flagstaff, standing on the shoulder of I-40 with her thumb out and a small suitcase at her feet. White hair, deeply lined face, the kind of fragility that comes with age. I normally never pick up hitchhikers, but it was July in Arizona, 112 degrees, and leaving an elderly woman on the roadside felt like murder. So I stopped, and she climbed into my cab with surprising agility, and the moment she settled into the passenger seat, I felt the temperature drop 10 degrees. My name is Carlos Mendez, and I drove with that woman for 6 hours before I understood what she really was. "Thank you," she said, her voice creaky with age. "I'm heading east, as far as you're going. Where specifically? It doesn't matter, just east." She smiled, and her teeth were too white, too perfect for someone her age. "I've been traveling a long time. I'll know when I arrive." We drove in silence for the first hour. I kept glancing at her, checking if she needed anything: water, a rest stop, medical attention. Old people in Arizona heat concerned me, but she seemed comfortable staring out the window at the desert landscape with an expression I couldn't read. Not quite nostalgia. More like recognition, like she was watching something she'd seen before play out again. The first change happened around hour 2. I'd looked away to check my mirrors, and when I looked back, her hair had more color in it. Not gray, not white, but salt and pepper, the kind of pattern you see on people in their 50s. I blinked, thinking my eyes were tired, thinking the changing light through the windshield was creating illusions. "Are you feeling all right?" I asked. "Better than I have in years," she said, and her voice sounded different, stronger. The creakiness was gone, replaced by something more vital. "Thank you for taking me east. It's important. It's necessary." "What's east? The beginning?" That didn't answer my question, but her tone suggested she wouldn't elaborate. I drove on, hauling 43,000 pounds of electronics toward Albuquerque. trying to ignore the growing certainty that something impossible was happening in my passenger seat. By hour 3, she looked 45. The lines on her face had softened. Her skin had tightened. Her posture had straightened. She was aging backward, physically regressing through decades with each passing mile. I was gripping the steering wheel too hard, my knuckles white, my heart hammering against my ribs. "What are you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm someone going home," she said, "or someone leaving home. It depends on which direction you measure time. For you, I'm aging backward. For me, you're aging backward. It's all relative to the direction of travel." "That's not possible." "And yet," she gestured to herself, "here we are." I should have stopped, should have made her get out. But some compulsion kept me driving, some need to see where this went, what she would become. She wasn't threatening me, wasn't doing anything except existing in my cab and defying every law of biology and physics. And I was terrified but also fascinated, watching something impossible unfold in real time. By hour 4, she looked 30. Beautiful now in the way people are at that age, all potential and strength. Her clothes had changed too. Or maybe they'd been changing gradually and I'd only just noticed. The elderly woman's practical dress had become younger, more stylish, more contemporary. Reality was rewriting itself around her, history flowing backward. "How old were you when I picked you up?" I asked. 73. "How old will I be when you let me out?" "I don't know." "How far are you going?" "To the beginning. To when I was born. To the hospital in Albany, New York, where I first opened my eyes in 1951. She looked at me with eyes that were growing younger, clearer, more alive with each mile. "I'm traveling backward through my life. Every mile. East is a week of my life reversed. Flagstaff to Albany is approximately 2,500 miles. That's 48 years. I'll arrive as a 25-year-old, which is when I first left Albany heading west. Full circle. The loop complete." "Why? Why are you doing this?" "Because I died," she said simply. 3 days ago in Flagstaff at 73 years old, heart attack in a motel room, but I wasn't finished. I had regrets, things I needed to fix, so I made a bargain with something that offered me a chance to go back. To return to the moment I made the wrong choice, to change what I'd done." "What did you do?" "I left someone in Albany in 1976. I was 25 and I got scared and I ran west. Spent my whole life out west, always moving, never settling, never going back. And I died alone, with that choice eating at me. So now I'm going back, literally. Traveling backward through my life until I reach that moment." By hour 5, she looked 25, the age she'd been when she left Albany. She was stunning, vibrant, full of life. She looked at her hands, flexing her fingers, examining skin that was smooth and unwrinkled. "Almost there," she said. "Almost back to the moment, almost home." "What happens when you get there?" "I get another chance. I walk into that apartment in Albany, and instead of packing and leaving, I stay. I make a different choice. And from that point, my life branches in a new direction. All those years I lived going west, they'll be erased, replaced by years going a different direction. I won't remember them. This version of me, the one who ran away, will cease to exist. What about me? What about this drive?" She looked at me with something like sadness. "You'll remember picking up an old woman in Flagstaff. You'll remember driving her east. But when you check your passenger seat somewhere in New Mexico, she'll be gone. You'll have no memory of when or where she left, just a vague sense that you helped someone once, and that maybe it mattered." The sun was setting, painting the New Mexico landscape in orange and red. She was still 25, but something was changing in a different way. She was becoming less solid, more translucent, like I could see through her to the passenger seat beyond. The closer we got to her destination, the less real she became in this timeline. "I'm fading," she said, noticing my stare. "I'm already in Albany in 1976, making the other choice. That version is becoming real, and this version is becoming memory. Soon I'll just be a ghost of a life that didn't happen. Will the person you left be there? Will they remember you? In the new timeline, I never left, so they'll remember me staying, remember 47 years together instead of 47 years apart. This pain I've carried, this regret, it will never have existed. Only this version of me, the ghost, will remember the life I lived without them." By hour 6, she was transparent. I could see the seat through her body, see the landscape through her face. She was barely there, barely real, a memory in the process of being forgotten by reality itself. Her voice was faint now, distant, like hearing someone speak from another room. "Thank you, Carlos. Thank you for carrying me home. Thank you for being part of the journey back to the moment I could fix." "Will you be happy?" I asked. "Back in the new life?" "I don't know. But I'll be there with them, and that's what matters. I'll have made the brave choice instead of the scared one. That has to count for something." Then she was gone. Between one heartbeat and the next, the passenger seat was empty. No fade out, no dramatic disappearance. Just suddenly absent, like she'd never been there. I pulled over on the shoulder, my hands shaking, and stared at the empty seat. There was no evidence, no indentation in the cushion where she'd sat, no fingerprints on the door handle. The temperature in my cab was normal, no residual cold. My memory of her was already becoming vague, details slipping away like trying to remember a dream after waking. I checked my GPS log. 6 hours of driving, Flagstaff to my current position in New Mexico. No stops recorded, no pause where I'd picked her up. According to the data, I'd been alone the entire time, but I remember. Not clearly, not completely, but enough. I remember an old woman aging backward. Remember her story about running away, about regret, about choosing to go back and fix the moment that defined her life. Remember her fading away as she returned to 1976 to make a different choice. Sometimes I wonder if it worked. If somewhere in Albany an old woman lived a different life, spent 47 years with someone instead of spending them alone on the road. If that version is real, and the version I met was just a ghost, a discarded timeline trying to erase itself. Or maybe I hallucinated the whole thing. Maybe I drove through Arizona heat and exhaustion and created a story to keep myself awake. Maybe there was never a hitchhiker, never a woman aging backward, never a choice being unmade. But 3 weeks later, I was passing through Albany. Had no reason to be there, no delivery, no pickup. But I took a detour anyway, drove through the city, found myself on a residential street I'd never seen before. And I saw her. An old woman, maybe 73, walking hand in hand with another old woman, both of them smiling, both of them moving with the careful pace of people who've grown old together. She saw me, made eye contact through my windshield, and for just a moment, I saw recognition in her eyes. Not memory, this version had never met me, but something deeper. An echo of a timeline where she'd ridden in my truck, where she'd aged backward to reach this moment, where she'd made a different choice. She smiled and nodded once. A thank you, maybe, or an acknowledgement. Then she turned back to her companion, and they continued walking, and I drove away. I don't pick up hitchhikers anymore. Can't risk it. Can't risk finding another ghost of a timeline trying to erase itself, another person traveling backward to fix what broke. Can't risk being part of someone's do-over, someone's chance to unmake their regrets. But sometimes, late at night on empty highways, I see figures on the shoulder with their thumbs out. Old people mostly, looking fragile and desperate. And I wonder if they're real or if they're like her, Ghosts trying to hitchhike backward through their lives, looking for the moment when everything went wrong, hoping to find a driver foolish enough to carry them home. I don't stop. I can't. Because if I pick them up, I'll watch them age backward. I'll watch them fade away as they return to fix what broke them. And I'll be left with vague memories and empty passenger seats and the growing certainty that time isn't as fixed as we pretend. The hitchhiker who ages in reverse is out there. Many of them probably, all traveling east or west or north or south, moving toward their beginnings, rewinding their lives 1 mile at a time, looking for the moment when they could have chosen differently. And somewhere, a version of them is making that other choice, living that other life, never knowing that in a discarded timeline they died with regrets and bargained for a second chance. I hope it was worth it. I hope the life she chose was better than the life she lived. I hope the woman I saw in Albany was happy, was fulfilled, was grateful for the 47 years she got by traveling backward through time in a trucker's cab. Because I'm carrying that memory. Vague as it is, fading as it becomes, I'm the only witness to a life that didn't happen. The only person who remembers the woman who ran away, who died alone, who hitchhiked backward through decades to fix her mistake. And every time I pass through Albany, I look for them. 2 old women walking together, living the life that started when a trucker stopped for a hitchhiker in Arizona heat and carried her backward through time to the moment she could choose love instead of fear. I haven't seen them again, but I remember enough to keep looking. Story 3, the way station with too many scales. The sign at the New Mexico way station on I-25 said it had 3 scales. Standard configuration, 1 truck at a time, quick process, back on the road in 5 minutes. But when I pulled in at 4:17 p.m. on September 22, 2023, I counted 17 scales arranged in a pattern that hurt to look at, converging toward a center point where geometry stopped making sense, and my depth perception failed completely. My name is Angela Frost, and I've been running Southwest routes for 14 years without seeing anything that violated Euclidean space until that afternoon. The scales were all active, all occupied by trucks that looked both present and absent, both solid and translucent, vehicles that existed in multiple states simultaneously. And the inspector waiting for me looked normal. Regulation uniform, clipboard, professional demeanor. Except for his eyes, which reflected light at wrong angles and seemed to track objects that weren't there. "Pull forward onto scale 7, he called out, gesturing toward a platform that appeared to be in 2 locations at once, both ahead of me and somehow behind me simultaneously. His voice echoed strangely, arriving at my ears from multiple directions, slightly out of sync. I pulled forward slowly, trying to ignore the spatial distortions, trying to maintain normal operations despite the growing certainty that this way station existed in more dimensions than I could perceive. My truck rolled onto the scale, and immediately every gauge in my cab went haywire. Speedometer spinning despite being stationary. Fuel gauge oscillating between empty and full. Temperature gauge reading both hot and cold. Oil pressure showing impossible numbers. The scale readout appeared on a digital display, 87,340 pounds. I was hauling 39,000 pounds of building materials in a standard configuration. Total rig weight should have been around 72,000 pounds. The number was wrong, but not wrong in a normal way, not like a malfunction or calibration error. Wrong like it was measuring something additional. Something beyond standard mass. The inspector approached my window, checking his clipboard. "Ms. Frost, your weight is over standard. We'll need to measure again on the auxiliary scales." "Which auxiliary scales?" He pointed toward the center of the way station, toward the point where all 17 scales seemed to converge. "Those. We use them for special circumstances, for cargo that weighs more than conventional mass." "I don't understand." Of course not. Most drivers don't. But your load is registering dimensional mass in addition to standard mass. That requires measurement in additional directions. Please pull forward to scale 0. Scale 0, not scale 1 or scale 2, but scale 0, a designation that shouldn't exist, a starting point before the beginning. I wanted to refuse, wanted to pull out and continue down I-25, but the exit was gone. The road I'd driven in on had disappeared, replaced by more scales, more platforms, all of them converging toward that central point where reality bent in ways my brain couldn't process. I drove forward. My truck moved normally, following standard physics, but the space around me didn't behave correctly. I was traveling in what should have been a straight line, but my position relative to the buildings and other trucks kept shifting, like I was moving along a curve that looked straight, like space itself was warped in this location. Scale 0 appeared ahead of me. Or maybe it had always been there and I'd only just gained the ability to perceive it. It was larger than the other platforms, configured in a shape that my eyes refused to recognize. Not circular, not rectangular, but something with too many sides, or not enough sides or sides that existed in directions I couldn't see. I drove onto it, feeling my tires roll over surface that felt both solid and intangible. The readout showed numbers that weren't numbers, symbols I'd never seen, mathematical expressions that included characters from no alphabet I knew. The inspector was at my window again, reading the display with a satisfied nod. There it is. Your cargo has a dimensional mass of 43 units in the 5th direction. That's over the limit. We'll need to assess the violation penalty. I'm hauling building materials. Concrete blocks, rebar, standard construction supplies. There's nothing unusual about my cargo. In 3 dimensions, no. But your cargo extends into additional spatial dimensions. The concrete blocks you're carrying, they're also existing in parallel spatial configurations, simultaneously here and elsewhere. Your trailer is containing multiple versions of the same cargo from slightly different dimensional positions. That creates mass in directions you can't perceive, but we can measure. He showed me his clipboard. The forms were written in languages that shifted as I looked at them, words rearranging themselves, English becoming something else and then becoming English again. You'll need to offload the excess dimensional mass before continuing. How do I offload something I can't see? We have equipment for that. Drive to the dimensional offloading area, Bay 3. It will handle the extraction. I followed his directions, driving through the way station toward a building that had too many corners, that appeared larger inside than outside dimensions allowed. Bay 3 was occupied by machinery that looked like a hybrid between a forklift and an abstract sculpture, all angles and surfaces that hurt to observe directly. A technician in a hazmat suit approached, connected what looked like cables to my trailer, and activated the machinery. I felt the trailer shift, felt weight being removed, but nothing visible was being unloaded. The cargo remained exactly where it was, pallets still secured, straps still tight. But something was being extracted, some component of the cargo that existed in directions I couldn't perceive. The process took 40 minutes. The technician disconnected the cables and gave me a thumbs up. You're clear. Return to scale 0 for verification. I drove back to the impossible scale. This time the readout showed normal numbers. 71,190 pounds, standard weight for my rig and cargo. The dimensional mass was gone, extracted into wherever the machinery had sent it. The inspector approved my weight slip and directed me to the exit. But the exit didn't lead back to I-25. Instead, I emerged onto a highway that looked similar but wrong, same general direction, same landscape. But the mile markers were different, the exits had different numbers, the road had subtle variations in curve and grade. I drove for 3 hours before I convinced myself I was back in normal space. The highway gradually aligned with my expectations, mile markers syncing with my GPS, exits matching my atlas. Whatever dimensional displacement the way station had caused, it was correcting itself, reality reasserting normal configuration. But my cargo was lighter. I knew because my truck handled differently, acceleration and braking responding with slightly less resistance. When I delivered the load in Santa Fe, the receiving dock supervisor looked confused. "You're short," he said, checking the manifest against what I'd brought. "We ordered 80 pallets of concrete blocks. You've got 63. I was loaded with the full order. I have the loading documents. I'm looking at 63 pallets. Either the loading crew miscounted or you lost cargo somewhere. Where did you stop?" "Just a way station. Routine inspection." He raised an eyebrow. "Which station?" "I-25 south of Albuquerque. Mile marker? I don't remember exactly." He pulled up a map on his computer, checking way station locations. "There's no way station on that section of I-25. Nearest one is 40 miles south, different location entirely." I looked at the map. He was right. The way station I'd stopped at, the one with 17 scales and the dimensional mass measurement, wasn't listed, wasn't marked. According to official records, didn't exist. But 17 pallets of concrete blocks were missing from my trailer, 17 pallets representing the dimensional mass that had been extracted. They hadn't been unloaded in any conventional sense. They'd been removed from this dimensional configuration, subtracted from this version of reality, sent elsewhere or elsewhen or else dimensionally. The company charged me for the missing cargo. Insurance didn't cover it because I couldn't explain where it went. Lost in transit wasn't acceptable when the trailer had been sealed and the seals showed no evidence of breaking. The cargo had simply ceased to exist in quantities that matched the manifest. I've driven I-25 through New Mexico hundreds of times since then. Never found that way station again. Never saw the 17 scales converging towards scale 0. Never encountered the inspector with his wrong-angle eyes and his measurements of dimensional mass. But sometimes, late at night on empty highways, my truck feels heavier than it should. I'll check my trailer. Empty or loaded, doesn't matter. And the handling will be wrong, like I'm carrying weight that isn't there, like my cargo exists in directions I can't see. And I'll watch my gauges spin and oscillate, showing measurements that don't match reality, reporting data from dimensions beyond my perception. Other truckers have mentioned similar experiences. Weight that doesn't match cargo, deliveries that arrive short without explanation, way stations that appear and disappear, scales that measure things beyond mass, inspectors who ask about dimensional violations and parallel cargo configurations. We don't talk about it openly. It sounds insane. It sounds like exhaustion or hallucination or the kind of story that gets you removed from driving duty pending psychological evaluation. But we share the stories quietly, in truck stop parking lots, over CB radio on lonely stretches. And we recognize each other. Drivers who've been through way stations that exist in too many dimensions, who've had cargo extracted into parallel configurations, who've lost loads to violations we don't understand. The building materials I delivered that day exist somewhere. 17 pallets of concrete blocks, rebar, construction supplies. They're in some version of Santa Fe, some dimensional position slightly displaced from the one we inhabit. Maybe someone in that configuration is using them right now, building structures that exist adjacent to ours, parallel but unreachable. And the way station is still there, still operating, still measuring dimensional mass and extracting violations. It appears for certain drivers at certain times when cargo extends into directions beyond three-dimensional space, when loads carry weight that conventional scales can't measure. I think about the inspector sometimes, about his wrong-angle eyes and his measurements of mass in the fifth direction. I wonder if he's human or if he's something else, something native to higher dimensions, working a job that involves policing the intersection between our space and wherever else connects to it. And I wonder what happens to the cargo that gets extracted. Where do those 17 pallets exist now? Are they still concrete blocks? Or does their nature change when moved between dimensions? Are they building materials in that configuration, or do they become something else, serve some other purpose, exist according to different physical laws? I'm more careful with weight now. Always check my cargo obsessively, always verify that what I'm hauling exists entirely within three-dimensional space. I avoid loads that feel strange, that seem heavier than they should be, that create sensations of weight in directions I can't define. Because I don't want to go back to scale zero. Don't want to drive onto that platform that exists in too many directions and have my cargo measured in dimensions I can't perceive. Don't want to lose more freight to wherever the dimensional extraction machinery sends it. The weigh station with too many scales is waiting. It's always waiting. And when you're carrying cargo that exists in parallel configurations, when your load extends beyond conventional space, it will appear. You'll pull in expecting 3 scales and find 17. You'll follow the inspector's directions towards scale 0. You'll watch as impossible machinery extracts the dimensional violations from your trailer. And you'll deliver short, missing cargo you can't explain, losing freight to violations in directions you never knew existed. The penalty for dimensional mass violations is forfeiture. The cargo that exists in too many places simultaneously must be reduced, condensed, collapsed into single configuration existence. Most of it comes back, 63 pallets out of 80. But 17 pallets remain elsewhere, in the 5th direction, in the space adjacent to ours, in the dimension we can't see but the scales can measure. And somewhere, something is receiving those deliveries. Something is unloading the cargo we lose to dimensional violations. Something is building structures with the materials we forfeit. The weigh station is the border crossing, the checkpoint between our configuration and theirs. The place where mass gets measured in all directions, not just the 3 we inhabit. And the inspector is still there, clipboard in hand, measuring trucks that carry weight in dimensions we can't perceive. I hope I never see him again. But I know I probably will. Story 4. The CB radio that receives tomorrow's traffic. The voice on Channel 19 was giving a detailed report about a 47-car pileup on I-80 near Cheyenne, describing casualties, blocked lanes, and emergency response times with the precision of someone watching it happen in real time. The report was clear, specific, and terrifying in its detail. It was also describing an accident that wouldn't occur for another 16 hours. My name is Derek Manning, and I'd been monitoring CB traffic for 19 years before I heard my first broadcast from the future. The phenomenon started on October 4th, 2023, around 9:30 p.m. while I was eastbound through Wyoming hauling automotive parts. Standard drive, standard conditions, standard CB chatter until a voice I didn't recognize broke through with a warning so specific it had to be real. Breaker 19, this is Night Watch. Major incident I-80 eastbound mile marker 362 tomorrow 1:47 p.m. Whiteout conditions, ice accumulation, 47 vehicles involved, multiple fatalities, highway closed for 11 hours. Advise all eastbound traffic to delay departure or take alternate routes. Repeating, this is tomorrow's traffic report. Major incident. Static swallowed the transmission. I grabbed my mic. Night Watch, this is Big Sky. Did you say tomorrow? Repeat your timeline. No response. The channel returned to normal chatter. Other drivers discussing fuel prices, restaurant recommendations, the usual midnight conversation. I asked if anyone else had heard the Night Watch transmission. Nobody acknowledged it. Either they hadn't heard or they were ignoring what sounded like a prank. But the details were too specific. Mile marker 362, Tomorrow 1:47 p.m., 47 vehicles. Those weren't random numbers. They had the precision of observed data, not imagination. I pulled over at the next rest area and checked weather forecasts. Clear conditions predicted for tomorrow. No mention of whiteout or ice accumulation. No warnings about hazardous travel. I tried calling dispatch, planning to report the warning despite how insane it sounded. Before I could dial, my CB crackled again. Same voice. "Big Sky, this is Nightwatch. You received my transmission, most don't. Most frequencies filter out temporal displacement. But your receiver is old enough, analog enough, imperfect enough to pick up signal bleed from adjacent time periods. You're hearing tomorrow's CB traffic. That's not possible. And yet, I'm broadcasting from 2:13 p.m. on October 5th, 2023. For me, the pileup happened 26 minutes ago. I'm sitting in the traffic jam right now, watching emergency crews extract bodies from crushed vehicles. I'm trying to warn yesterday's traffic, trying to prevent this, but causality is uncertain. My warning might cause the pileup by making drivers alter their schedules in ways that create the conditions for collision, or my warning might prevent it entirely. I don't know. I've been broadcasting backward for 3 hours, and I don't know if anyone's hearing me. I'm hearing you. But how is this possible? CB radio operates on specific frequencies, propagating through atmospheric conditions. Under certain circumstances, solar activity, ionospheric distortion, electromagnetic anomalies, those signals can reflect forward or backward through time. You're picking up transmissions from approximately 16 hours in your future. My present, your tomorrow. And I'm trying to save lives by warning past traffic about what I'm currently witnessing. I sat in my truck, engine idling, trying to process what I was hearing. Time-displaced CB transmission. Warnings from the future, a pileup that hadn't happened yet but was being described by someone watching it in their present. It violated everything I knew about physics, about causality, about how radio signals worked. But the details were so specific. Mile marker 362. 1:47 p.m. whiteout conditions. How could someone invent that level of precision? What should I do? I asked. Don't be on I-80 eastbound tomorrow at 1:47 p.m. Don't be anywhere near mile marker 362. Delay your departure, take I-76 south, wait until evening. Just don't be there when the conditions collapse. What causes it? Sudden weather shift, temperature drop, moisture flash freeze, ice accumulation in 17 minutes. Most drivers don't slow down in time. First collision triggers chain reaction. 47 vehicles, 8 fatalities, 33 injuries. Total highway closure until 1:03 a.m. the following day. He paused. I'm one of the vehicles involved. I'm trapped in my cab right now, waiting for extraction, broadcasting backward because I have nothing else to do. If you hear this warning and act on it, maybe the pileup doesn't happen. Maybe causality branches and creates a timeline where I'm not sitting here with 3 crushed vertebrae waiting for emergency services. The transmission ended. I tried responding but got no answer. Channel 19 returned to normal traffic, other drivers oblivious to what I'd just heard. I checked my receiver, making sure I hadn't imagined it. The unit was old, a vintage Cobra from the 1990s, all analog components, no digital filtering. Exactly the kind of imperfect receiver Nightwatch had described, capable of picking up signal anomalies, temporal displacement, broadcasts from adjacent time periods. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. I kept monitoring Channel 19, listening for more transmissions from the future. Got 2 more warnings before dawn. Breaker 19, this is Shadowrun, diesel spill I-80 westbound mile marker 401 tomorrow 3:22 a.m. Black ice conditions, multiple rollovers, highway closed. Breaker 19, this is Iron Horse. Engine fire I-25 southbound mile marker 18 tomorrow 11:09 a.m. Wind spreads to grass fire, closes highway for 6 hours. Specific warnings, exact times, detailed descriptions, all from drivers experiencing the incidents in their present, broadcasting backward to warn yesterday's traffic. And I was apparently one of the few receivers capable of picking up the temporally displaced signals. By morning, I'd decided to test it. I called other drivers I knew, asked if they'd heard the night watch warning. Nobody had. I checked news sources throughout the day, monitoring I-80 conditions near mile marker 362. At 1:33 p.m., weather reports suddenly shifted. Unexpected temperature drop, moisture moving in, ice warnings issued. At 1:47 p.m. exactly, the first reports of a major pileup came through normal emergency channels. 47 vehicles, multiple fatalities, highway closed exactly as Nightwatch had described. The warnings from the future were accurate. The CB transmissions were real. And I was receiving tomorrow's traffic report 16 hours before the incidents occurred. I started keeping a log. Every temporal broadcast I received, I documented. Time, location, incident description. Over the next 3 weeks, I confirmed 13 warnings, all accurate, all describing events that occurred exactly as the future transmissions predicted. But I also noticed something disturbing. The incidents kept happening despite the warnings. My receiving the transmissions didn't prevent the accidents. Causality wasn't branching. The timeline was fixed, deterministic, playing out exactly as the future broadcasts described, which meant Nightwatch was still trapped in his cab, still suffering from crushed vertebrae, still experiencing the pileup despite broadcasting backward to prevent it. The warnings weren't changing the future. They were just advance notices of inevitable events. On October 28th, I received a transmission from my own future self. Big Sky, this is Big Sky. Transmission from November 2nd, 4:17 p.m. You're going to jackknife on I-25 southbound mile marker 143. Black ice, steering overcorrection, trailer swings into opposing lanes. Head-on collision with northbound vehicle. You survive. They don't. I'm broadcasting backward from the hospital, trying to warn you, trying to change what happened. Don't drive on November 2nd. Don't be on I-25 in the afternoon. Stay home. Break the pattern. I was listening to myself from 4 days in the future, warning about my own accident, describing my own collision, trying to prevent my own deadly mistake. The voice was mine. Same patterns, same inflections, same terminology. It was unmistakably me, experiencing consequences and broadcasting backward in desperation. I tried to heed the warning. Canceled my November 2nd schedule, arranged for someone else to take the load, planned to stay off the road entirely. But on November 1st, dispatch called with an emergency shipment, time-sensitive medical equipment, Denver to Albuquerque. Only I was positioned correctly to make the delivery window. Patient need, they said. Life or death situation? Could I please take the run? I tried to refuse, explained I had a scheduling conflict. They offered double rate, emphasized the critical nature, appealed to my conscience. Eventually I agreed, convincing myself I'd be careful, I'd watch for black ice, I'd avoid mile marker 143 or at least approach it with extreme caution. November 2nd, 4:14 p.m. I was southbound on I-25 approaching mile marker 143. Conditions were dry, clear, safe. I was being paranoid, checking my mirrors constantly, ready for any sign of ice. At 4:16 p.m., temperature dropped suddenly. Moisture flash froze. The road became glass. I felt the trailer start to swing before I consciously recognized what was happening. Tried to correct, turned the wheel too hard, overcorrected exactly as my future self had described. The trailer jackknifed, swinging into the northbound lanes. I saw the car coming, saw the driver's face through the windshield, saw the moment of impact. The collision wasn't as bad as I'd feared. My truck's mass absorbed most of the force. But the car was destroyed. I survived with minor injuries. The driver of the car didn't survive. A 23-year-old woman heading home from work, in the wrong place at the wrong time because I'd jackknifed into her lane. From the hospital, I broadcast backward. Grabbed my portable CB tuned to channel 19 and warned my past self about the accident I'd just caused. I described every detail, hoping that hearing my own voice from the future would convince me to stay off the road, to refuse the emergency shipment, to break the causal chain. But I knew it wouldn't work, because I'd already received that warning 4 days ago and I'd still ended up here. The timeline was fixed. The warning wasn't preventing the accident, it was part of the accident, part of the causal chain that led to this moment. I'd killed someone because I was trying to prevent killing someone. The warning created the circumstances that caused what it was warning about. I'm still driving, still monitoring channel 19, still receiving transmissions from the future. But I don't act on them anymore. Don't try to prevent the incidents they describe. Because I've learned that the warnings are part of causality, not exceptions to it. Receiving tomorrow's traffic report doesn't let you change tomorrow. It just means you suffer through knowing what's coming. Last week, I received a transmission from 6 months in my future. My own voice, older, more tired. Big Sky, this is Big Sky. Transmission from April 9th, 2024. You're going to die on I-40 westbound mile marker 89. Brake failure, downhill grade, unable to stop, impact at bottom of grade, fatal. I'm broadcasting from the moment before impact, using my last seconds to warn you. I don't know if you're hearing this. I don't know if it matters. But I tried. In my final moments, I tried to warn myself, to change what's happening, to break the loop. Then static, then nothing. I checked the date. April 9th is 4 months away. I know the location, I-40 westbound mile marker 89, a long downhill grade in New Mexico. I know what's going to happen, and I know I can't prevent it. Because the warnings don't change the future. They're just advance notice. Just tomorrow's traffic report received today, describing accidents that are already fixed in the timeline. I could stop driving, could quit, sell my truck, never touch I-40 again, but I know I won't. Because if my future self is broadcasting that warning, it means I'm still driving on April 9th, still on I-40, still experiencing brake failure on that downhill grade. The timeline is fixed. The CB transmissions from the future are accurate, and all the warnings in the world won't change what's already happened from tomorrow's perspective. I'm still monitoring channel 19, still hearing broadcasts from drivers experiencing their tomorrows, still documenting the incidents before they occur. And in 4 months, I'll be broadcasting backward myself, warning about brake failure at mile marker 89, trying futilely to change what I'm already experiencing. The CB radio that receives tomorrow's traffic is cursed. It shows you the future but doesn't give you the power to change it. It lets you hear your own warnings from moments you haven't lived yet, describing accidents you haven't caused yet, broadcasting from a timeline that's already fixed. And the worst part is knowing that every warning I've received, every future broadcast I've heard wasn't someone preventing an accident. It was someone experiencing an accident, broadcasting backward in desperate hope that maybe this time the timeline will branch, causality will break, the future will change. It never does. Tomorrow's traffic is already happening. We just haven't arrived there yet. Story 5. The load that gets heavier the longer you drive. My truck weighed 72,400 pounds when I loaded in Omaha. Standard configuration, legal weight. Manifest showing 38,000 pounds of industrial machinery in my 53-foot trailer. By the time I reached Denver 7 hours later, my rig weighed 94,000 pounds. I know because I crossed 2 certified scales, both showing the same impossible increase. 22,000 pounds had somehow accumulated in my trailer while I was driving at 70 miles per hour on I-80, with sealed doors and no stops. My name is Richard Vasquez, and I spent 6 days hauling cargo that gained mass spontaneously, watching my truck grow heavier with each passing mile, feeling my suspension compress under weight that shouldn't exist until I understood what I was really carrying. Not just industrial machinery, something else. Something that fed on motion and distance and the specific conditions created by long-haul trucking. The first sign was handling. My truck drove normally leaving Omaha, but by the time I hit the Nebraska-Wyoming border, 3 hours into the drive, the steering felt sluggish. Not dangerously so, just enough to notice. Like I'd picked up extra weight somewhere. I dismissed it as wind resistance or imagination, kept driving, kept monitoring my gauges for any sign of mechanical problems. At the Wyoming-Colorado border, I stopped at a weigh station. Required stop, routine inspection. The scale operator called me over to his office with a concerned expression. "Sir, your weight is showing 83,000 pounds. That's over legal limit. I'm going to need to inspect your cargo." "That's not possible. I loaded at 72,000. I have the certified weight slip from Omaha." He showed me his readout. 83,170 pounds. "Either your loading scale was miscalibrated or you picked up cargo somewhere. I need to inspect." We walked back to my trailer. The seals were intact. Same numbered seals applied at the Omaha loading dock, unbroken, showing no evidence of tampering. But regulations required inspection for overweight vehicles, so I broke the seals and opened the doors. The cargo looked identical to what I'd loaded. 16 pallets of industrial machinery secured with load straps arranged according to the loading plan. Nothing additional. Nothing out of place. The weigh station inspector climbed into the trailer with a flashlight, checking between pallets, looking for hidden cargo. Anything that would explain the weight, increase. He found nothing. Same cargo, same configuration. But when we sealed the trailer and re-weighed, the scale showed 83,450 pounds. The weight had increased by 280 pounds during the 20-minute inspection. "This doesn't make sense," the inspector muttered. "Weight doesn't spontaneously generate. Something is wrong with the scales or the cargo or both. What should I do?" "Legally, you're overweight. I should cite you. But the cargo matches the manifest. The seals were intact and I can't identify any violation. This is unprecedented." He thought for a moment. "I'm going to let you continue to the next weigh station. See if they get the same reading. If the weight increase continues, we'll need to involve state officials, maybe get engineers to examine your cargo. Something is happening here that I don't understand." I continued toward Denver, monitoring my truck's behavior carefully. The handling kept deteriorating, suspension compressing further, like I was hauling a progressively heavier load. I checked my mirrors obsessively, looking for any sign of the trailer deforming under impossible weight. Everything looked normal visually, but the physics were wrong. At the next weigh station, 30 miles closer to Denver, my weight registered at 87,920 pounds. 14,000 pounds heavier than when I'd loaded, 4,000 pounds heavier than the previous weigh station 90 minutes earlier. The cargo was accumulating mass at a rate of approximately 3,000 pounds per hour. The second inspector was less accommodating. "You're significantly overweight. I'm detaining your vehicle until we determine what's happening. This is either equipment malfunction or something I've never encountered." They brought in a state transportation engineer. He examined my truck, the scales, the cargo. Ran calibration tests on the scales. They were accurate. Examined the trailer for hidden compartments. There were none. Inspected the cargo itself, measuring and photographing each pallet. The industrial machinery matched the manifest exactly. Same parts, same quantities, same specifications, but the combined weight was impossible. "It's like the cargo is becoming denser," the engineer said, reviewing his measurements. "The volume is constant, but the mass is increasing. Objects don't do that. Mass is a fixed property. This violates conservation of mass. What's causing it? I don't know. The cargo isn't changing visibly, but it's definitely heavier than it should be, gravitationally heavier. It's pulling down with more force than its composition should allow. He looked at me with confusion. What exactly is this machinery? What does it do? I checked my manifest. The cargo was described as industrial processing equipment, with a shipper listed as Tertiary Dynamics Limited. No additional details. I called my dispatcher asking for more information about the company and the cargo. She had nothing beyond what the manifest showed. It's a sealed load, Richard. They paid in advance, provided proper documentation. We don't ask questions beyond legal requirements. The engineer made calls. State officials, weight enforcement, federal transportation authorities. Nobody had any protocol for spontaneously accumulating mass. After 4 hours of consultation, they made a decision. I could continue to the delivery location in Denver, but I'd be escorted by State Patrol, with instructions to drive slowly and stop immediately if the weight increase caused handling problems. I drove at 50 miles per hour, flashers on, State Patrol behind me, feeling my truck labor under the impossible and growing load. By the time I reached the Denver delivery address, my weight was over 94,000 pounds. 22,000 pounds heavier than when I'd loaded, all of it accumulated during 7 hours of driving. The delivery location wasn't a standard warehouse. It was an industrial facility with heavy security surrounded by high fences and warning signs about restricted access. A receiving supervisor met me at the gate, checked my credentials, and directed me to a specialized loading dock that looked more like a scientific facility than a standard freight terminal. "We've been monitoring your weight gain," he said calmly. "Don't worry. It's expected. The cargo is functioning as designed." "What do you mean functioning? What is this machinery?" "It's not machinery in the conventional sense. It's mass accumulators. Devices that absorb ambient energy and convert it to matter. They're inactive when stationary, but motion activates them. The vibration of the truck, the kinetic energy of travel, the electromagnetic fields from your engine, they use all of it to generate additional mass. The longer you drive, the heavier the cargo becomes. It's a transportation perpetual motion system. We ship initial mass, and it generates additional mass during transit by harvesting energy from the vehicle carrying it. That's impossible. That violates physics. It violates classical physics. It's consistent with certain interpretations of quantum field theory. Under specific conditions, energy can be converted to matter. Your truck provided those conditions. The cargo simply took advantage of them." He gestured to the loading dock. "Back in. We'll offload. The accumulated mass is valuable. We paid for the initial 38,000 pounds, but we're receiving 60,000 pounds. The difference is profit, generated by the transportation process itself." I backed into the dock, still trying to process what I'd heard. Mass accumulators, devices that created matter from kinetic energy. Cargo that got heavier the longer you drove, accumulating mass spontaneously, violating everything I'd been taught about physics. They offloaded quickly, using specialized equipment. As each pallet was removed, I felt my suspension rise, felt my truck returning to normal handling. When the trailer was empty, I pulled forward and weighed. My tractor alone weighed exactly what it should, 28,000 pounds. The accumulated mass had been entirely in the cargo, which was now stacked in the facility, ready for whatever purpose mass accumulators served. The receiving supervisor handed me a completion slip. "Thank you for the delivery. The mass generation was within expected parameters. We'll be using your company again for future shipments." "I'm not hauling this again. Whatever those things are, they're dangerous." "Dangerous?" "They just converted kinetic energy to matter. That's a technological achievement, not a danger." He smiled. But I understand your concern. Most drivers find the experience unsettling. We'll make sure future shipments go to drivers who understand what they're carrying. I left Denver with an empty trailer and a head full of questions. Mass accumulators that gained weight during transport, that harvested energy from vehicle motion and converted it to matter, that violated conservation of mass while somehow being consistent with quantum physics. It seemed impossible. But I'd watched the weight increase. I'd felt my truck grow heavier. I'd delivered 22,000 pounds of cargo that hadn't existed when I left Omaha. A week later, dispatch offered me another load from the same company. Different cargo description, energy storage units, but the same shipper, Tertiary Dynamics Limited. I refused. They offered double rate. I still refused. They assigned it to another driver, a guy named Tom Parsons, who needed the money and didn't ask questions. Tom called me 3 days later, panicked. "Rick, this cargo is getting heavier. I loaded at 60,000 pounds and now I'm showing 87,000. What the hell is happening?" They're mass accumulators. They generate matter from kinetic energy. The longer you drive, the heavier they get. That's impossible. I know, but it's happening. Just deliver them and get clear. Don't take another load from that company. Tom delivered successfully. But 2 weeks later, he took another load from Tertiary Dynamics. And then another. The money was too good. The cargo was too profitable. The company kept offering him runs and he kept taking them, hauling devices that gained weight during transport, accumulating mass from ambient energy. On his fourth run, something went wrong. I heard about it through CB chatter. Tom's truck had become too heavy, the accumulated mass exceeding what the trailer could handle. His axles had collapsed under the impossible weight, and the trailer had sunk to the pavement, wheels splayed outward, supporting over 120,000 pounds of cargo that had started at 60,000. They had to bring in specialized equipment to offload. By the time they finished, Tom's trailer was destroyed, bent and warped under forces it wasn't designed to handle. Tom was physically fine but psychologically shattered, rambling about cargo that shouldn't exist, about physics that didn't work correctly, about devices that ate energy and produced mass. I haven't heard from him since, but I still get offers from Tertiary Dynamics. They call dispatch regularly, requesting me specifically for specialized loads. I always refuse, because I understand what those mass accumulators really are. They're not just devices that convert energy to matter. They're weapons, or experiments, or demonstrations of physics that shouldn't be possible. And somewhere in Denver, in that industrial facility with heavy security, someone is stacking accumulated mass. Pounds and pounds of matter that didn't exist before being transported, created spontaneously from the kinetic energy of trucks driving across America. They're building something with that mass, creating something with matter that originated as diesel fuel and engine vibration and the rotational energy of wheels. I wonder what happens when they have enough, when they've accumulated sufficient mass from sufficient shipments, when whatever they're building is complete. The cargo that gets heavier the longer you drive is still being transported. Other drivers have taken over the routes I refused, and with every delivery more mass accumulates, more matter gets created from energy. More pounds get added to loads that started lighter. Conservation of mass is being violated with every shipment, and somewhere someone is using that violation to build something impossible. I'm grateful I stopped hauling for them. Grateful I refused the money and the repeated offers, because I suspect the drivers who continued, the ones who kept taking those loads, are transporting something more than just cargo. They're feeding a process, enabling a creation, participating in physics that shouldn't work. And when it's complete, when sufficient mass has been accumulated, when the impossible becomes operational, I hope I'm far away, on different routes, hauling normal cargo that weighs the same at delivery as it did at loading. Cargo that doesn't spontaneously generate matter from the energy of motion. Cargo that obeys the laws of physics, I was taught. Cargo that stays the same weight from origin to destination. Normal cargo, if that still exists. Story 6. The rest area where your truck doesn't remember you. I parked at the Colorado rest area on I-70 and went inside to use the facilities. 3 minutes. That's all. 3 minutes between leaving my truck and returning to find it didn't recognize me anymore. The door handle was wrong, configured differently than I remembered. The step up into the cab was higher. The interior layout was mirrored, driver's seat on the right instead of left. Everything was wrong, like I'd returned to a version of my truck from a parallel timeline where manufacturing had made different choices. My name is Jonathan Price, and I've driven the same Kenworth for 8 years. I know every dent, every modification, every quirk of its personality. But at that Colorado rest area on November 18, 2023, my truck became something else. The same model, the same color, the same general configuration. But all the details were wrong, like I was looking at my truck's mirror image, its reflection made physical. The key still worked. Same key, same ignition. But when I turned it, the engine sounded different. Not wrong exactly, but off in pitch and timbre, like a voice you recognize but can't quite place. The dashboard was reversed, gauges on the opposite side. The shifter pattern was inverted. The CB radio was where the GPS should be. I got out and checked the exterior. Same truck, same paint, same decals, same license plate. But the fuel tanks were on the wrong side. The exhaust pipe exited differently. The trailer coupling was oriented in ways I didn't remember. It was like someone had taken my truck, photographed it, and reconstructed a mirror version from the photographs. Other trucks in the rest area looked normal. Their drivers were going about normal business, fueling, checking loads, taking breaks. I approached another driver, a woman prepping for departure. "Excuse me, does my truck look strange to you?" She glanced at my Kenworth. "Looks fine. Typical setup. But the fuel tanks are on the wrong side." She looked again, more carefully. "They're on the driver's side, that's standard." "No, they're on the passenger side now. They weren't there before." She gave me the kind of look people give when they're concerned about someone's mental state. "Sir, are you feeling okay? Maybe you need to rest before continuing." I walked away before she decided to call for help. This wasn't something I could explain. My truck had been transformed, not replaced, but altered, reconfigured, changed into a mirror version of itself while I was gone for 3 minutes. And somehow, it was the version everyone else thought was normal. I climbed back into the cab and tried to drive. Everything was backward. The shifter required opposite patterns. The mirrors showed reversed perspectives. The handling felt wrong because the weight distribution had changed. I could technically drive it, but it was like learning to drive all over again, every instinct reversed, every automatic response incorrect. I made it 5 miles before I had to pull over. The cognitive dissonance was overwhelming. This was my truck, but it also wasn't. Everything was familiar yet wrong. My muscle memory kept reaching for controls in positions they no longer occupied. My spatial awareness kept expecting weight and balance that didn't exist anymore. I called dispatch, trying to explain. "Something happened to my truck. It's been changed. It's not configured correctly." "What kind of change? Mechanical failure?" "No, it's mirrored. Everything's on the opposite side. The layout is reversed." Long silence. "Jonathan, are you sure you got into the right truck?" "It's my truck. Same key, same license plate. But the configuration is different." "Kenworths don't have variable configurations. They're manufactured to standard specifications. If the key works and the license plate matches, you're in your truck. Maybe you're experiencing some kind of disorientation. Do you need medical assistance?" I hung up. This wasn't something dispatch could help with. This wasn't mechanical failure or confusion. This was fundamental alteration. My truck had been changed by that rest area, transformed into a mirror version, and I was the only person who remembered it being different. I forced myself to drive, relearning every control, every response. The trailer handled differently because its coupling had reversed. The braking felt wrong because the weight distribution had changed. Everything required conscious thought instead of instinct. By the time I reached Denver 3 hours later, I was exhausted from the mental effort of operating a vehicle that was both familiar and alien. The delivery dock supervisor noticed immediately. "Your truck is configured wrong. You've got a European specification cab, driver's seat on the right. We don't see those in the US. It wasn't like this yesterday. It changed at a rest area in Colorado. Trucks don't change. You must have picked up a different unit. It's the same unit, same VIN, same license plate. It just reversed." He gave me the same concerned look the driver at the rest area had. "Sir, maybe you should see a doctor. Confusion about your vehicle configuration could indicate a serious medical issue." I delivered the load without further discussion. But the problem remained. My truck was wrong, and I was the only person who thought so. Everyone else treated the mirror configuration as normal, as standard, as how it had always been. Over the next week, I tried to adapt, relearn the controls, adjust my instincts, accept that this was my truck now, whether I liked it or not. The physical driving became manageable eventually, muscle memory adapting to the new configuration. But the psychological impact persisted. I knew this wasn't how my truck had been. I remembered the correct layout, and the fact that reality disagreed with my memory was deeply disturbing. A month later, I needed to stop for fuel. The nearest option was the same Colorado rest area where the transformation had occurred. I tried to pass it, tried to continue to the next services, but my fuel gauge was critical. I had to stop. I fueled carefully, watching my truck the entire time, as if looking away would allow it to change again. When I finished and walked back to the cab, I found it transformed once more. Back to the original configuration. Driver's seat on the left, fuel tanks on the correct side, controls in their remembered positions. My truck had been reversed again, returned to the layout I remembered from before. I checked with other drivers in the rest area. "Does my truck look normal to you?" One guy glanced over. "Looks fine. Standard American configuration." "You're sure?" "Yeah, driver's seat on the left. What else would it be?" He didn't remember. Nobody remembered. The version of my truck that had existed for the past month, the mirror configuration, had been erased from everyone's memory except mine. Reality had reverted, and the intervening month of reverse truck configuration had become a timeline that only I experienced. I sat in my cab, hands shaking, trying to understand what was happening. The rest area was doing something to vehicles, to reality, to memory, transforming trucks into mirror versions, altering reality's configuration, making everyone except the driver believe the new version had always existed, and then reversing it randomly, snapping back to the original configuration, erasing the transformed period from collective memory. I checked my logs. The previous month showed normal operations, deliveries made, miles driven, fuel purchased. Everything I'd actually done. But my delivery slips showed dates and locations that didn't match my memory. I remembered struggling with reversed controls for a month. The record showed I'd been operating normally, with no configuration issues, no adaptation period, no reversed truck. 2 timelines. 2 versions of the past month. Mine, where I'd driven a mirror-configured truck and struggled with every control. And reality's, where I'd apparently driven normally with standard configuration. Both memories were real. Both had evidence, but they contradicted each other completely. I avoided that rest area for 6 months, took alternate routes, refueled elsewhere, went miles out of my way to not pass through that specific location on I-70. But eventually, circumstances forced me back. Low fuel, no other options. Snowstorm closing alternate routes. I pulled in with dread, fueled quickly, and returned to find my truck transformed again. This time it was worse. Not just mirrored, but with additional changes. The cab was larger, with extra sleeping space I'd never had. The dashboard included controls for systems I didn't recognize. The trailer hookup was configured for equipment I didn't own. My truck had become an upgraded version with features and modifications that had never existed. And when I asked other drivers if my truck looked strange, they all said the same thing. Nice rig. Those 2024 upgrades really improved the Kenworth line. But it was 2023. The 2024 models hadn't been released. Yet my truck was supposedly one of them, and everyone treated this as normal, as expected, as how my truck had always been. I'm writing this from a motel parked 200 miles from that rest area, trying to decide what to do. My truck currently has configurations from a model year that doesn't exist yet. Reality insists this is normal. My memory disagrees. And I know that if I stop at that rest area again, my truck will transform once more into something else, some other configuration, some other version. Each transformation overwrites reality's memory, makes everyone believe the new configuration is correct. Only I remember the previous versions, the original truck, the way things were before the rest area started altering reality. Other drivers must have experienced this, must have stopped at that rest area and found their vehicles transformed. But if reality overwrites everyone's memory except the drivers, nobody would believe them. Nobody would understand. Everyone would treat the transformation as normal, as how things had always been. I think the rest area exists outside normal causality. It's a point where reality is mutable, where configurations can be altered, where memory becomes subjective and physics becomes suggestion. Vehicles that stop there get transformed, revised, updated to match alternate timelines or future possibilities or mirror dimensions. And the drivers are left with two sets of memories, the remembered version and the experienced version. Both real, both contradictory, both unable to coexist in a single coherent timeline. I still have the keys to my truck. They work regardless of configuration. I still have my CDL with my vehicle description. The description changes each time my truck transforms, updating automatically to match the new configuration. I have photographs of my truck from before the first transformation. The photographs change too, showing whatever version currently exists. Only my memory remains constant. Only I remember all the versions. The original, the first mirror configuration, the 2024 upgrades, whatever comes next. The rest area where your truck doesn't remember you is still operating. Still transforming vehicles. Still rewriting reality for every driver who stops there. I could avoid it forever. Take different routes. Never stop in Colorado. But that wouldn't change what's happened. My truck has been transformed 3 times already. It remembers its alterations somehow, even if reality forgets. And I suspect eventually, with enough transformations, with enough timeline revisions, my truck will become something that doesn't exist anywhere in any normal timeline. Something impossible. Something that only functions in the gaps between realities. And I'll be the only person who remembers the original. The only person who knows that trucks aren't supposed to transform when you take a 3-minute bathroom break. The only witness to alterations that everyone else believes have always existed. The rest area is waiting. It will transform my truck again. And again. And again. Until one day I won't remember the original either. Until my memory gives up trying to hold contradictory timelines. Until I accept that trucks transform, reality revises, and the configuration you return to was always the configuration you left. The rest area where your truck doesn't remember you is patient. It has all the time in every timeline. Story 7. The highway that moves when you're not looking. Mile marker 47 appeared 3 times during the 20-mile stretch between Elko and Wells, Nevada. Always in a different location, always accompanied by the same abandoned gas station that shouldn't have been there. I'd driven US 93 north hundreds of times over 12 years, knew every exit and landmark, could navigate it from memory. But on December 2nd, 2023, the highway rearranged itself whenever I looked away, shifting landmarks to different positions, relocating exits, changing the distance between fixed points. My name is Lisa Chen, and I spent 8 hours driving through a road that refused to stay in one configuration, watching reality restructure itself in my mirrors, realizing too late that some highways aren't fixed geography but living systems that move and adapt and feed on the attention of drivers who travel them. The first sign was subtle. I passed the exit for Spring Creek, a small town with one gas station and a diner I'd stopped at dozens of times. The sign said it was in 2 miles. I drove for 6 miles without seeing it. When I checked my mirrors, the exit sign was behind me, positioned as if I'd already passed Spring Creek, though I'd never reached it. The town had been displaced, moved from ahead of me to behind me without my noticing the transition. I turned around at the next opportunity, thinking I'd somehow missed it despite the impossibility. Drove back south. The Spring Creek exit appeared in a different location, 3 miles from where it had been before. I took the exit, followed the ramp, and found nothing. No Spring Creek, no gas station, no diner, just empty desert and a road that terminated in dirt after half a mile, as if the town had been removed and only the exit sign remained. I returned to US 93 and continued north, my hands tight on the wheel, my mind trying to rationalize what I'd seen. GPS errors, fatigue-induced confusion, memory failure, but the explanations didn't fit. I wasn't tired. My GPS was functioning, my memory was clear, the highway was moving, mile marker 47 appeared. I noted its location relative to other landmarks, a distinctive rock formation to the east, a cell tower to the west. Drove for 9 miles. Mile marker 47 appeared again, in a completely different location, no rock formation, different cell tower, different landscape. I checked my odometer. I'd definitely driven 9 miles, but the mile marker insisted I'd return to the same location. I pulled over and examined a road atlas, trying to anchor myself to fixed geography. US 93 north from Elko to Wells, approximately 50 miles passing through specific towns, specific landmarks. But the atlas didn't match what I was seeing. Towns listed as being at specific mile markers weren't there. Landmarks shown on the map didn't exist. The highway I was driving didn't correspond to the documented route. The abandoned gas station appeared at mile marker 47 for the 3rd time. I'd never seen it before, not in 12 years of driving this route. But now it was there. A derelict building from the 1950s, pumps long dry, windows broken, roof partially collapsed. I stopped to photograph it, to create evidence that I wasn't hallucinating. When I returned to my truck and looked back at the gas station, it was in a different state of decay. More collapsed. The roof was gone entirely. The pumps were rusted beyond recognition. Decades of deterioration had occurred while I wasn't looking, and when I checked my camera, the photograph I'd taken showed the newer version. Less decay, roof intact, windows broken but not missing. The gas station was aging backward or forward depending on when I observed it. Existing in multiple temporal states simultaneously, appearing at mile marker 47 because that's where the highway needed it to be, regardless of where mile marker 47 actually was. I drove faster, trying to outrun the shifting geography, trying to reach Wells and get off this nightmare highway. But the distance wouldn't resolve. I'd drive for 20 miles according to my odometer, but the landmarks would indicate I'd only covered 5 miles. or I'd drive for 5 miles and find myself 40 miles further than I should be. Space was elastic here. Distance was suggestion. The highway moved when I wasn't looking, rearranging itself, shortening or lengthening the distance between points according to rules I didn't understand. Another vehicle appeared ahead, a semi like mine traveling north. I accelerated to catch up, desperate for another witness, someone to confirm I wasn't experiencing psychotic break. But I couldn't close the distance. The truck ahead maintained constant separation no matter how fast I drove. When I pushed to 80 miles per hour, it remained exactly the same distance ahead. When I slowed to 60, it stayed the same distance ahead. It wasn't moving relative to me. It was fixed in position relative to my perspective, an object painted onto the landscape at a specific distance, moving with the highway rather than on it. I tried my CB radio. Northbound truck ahead, this is Desert Rose, do you copy? Static. Then a voice, degraded and distant. Desert Rose, this is northbound truck, I copy, but signal is degrading. Where? You. US 93 north, somewhere between Elko and Wells. I can't get accurate position, the highway is moving. Moving? What you mean? The landmarks are changing position. Mile markers are repeating. Distance isn't consistent. Long silence filled with static. Then, this highway, 3 days, can't. Wells, distance keeps extending. Every time I think I'm close, it moves. Further away, I'm trapped in a stretch that won't resolve. 3 days. The driver ahead had been on this 50-mile stretch for 3 days, unable to reach the destination, unable to escape the highway that kept extending, kept moving, kept rearranging itself to prevent arrival. How much fuel do you have? I asked. Static. Gauge shows full, always full, but impossible. I've driven hundreds of miles without refueling. The fuel none regenerates. The highway is feeding me, to keep me moving. The truck ahead flickered, phasing in and out of visibility. It existed and didn't exist, both present and absent. A quantum object that I was collapsing into observation through the act of watching it. When I looked away and then back, it was further ahead. The distance increased. The highway stretched to accommodate its new position. I passed the abandoned gas station for the 4th time. It was fully operational now. Lights on, pumps active, the attendant standing by the fuel islands. He waved at me, gesturing for me to stop. I didn't. I drove past, watching in my mirrors as the gas station deteriorated rapidly, aging decades in seconds, collapsing back into the derelict state, then phasing out of existence entirely. The highway was showing me different temporal states, different versions of the same location from different eras, all of them existing simultaneously, all of them accessible depending on when and how I observed them. My fuel gauge dropped to quarter tank. I'd been driving for 6 hours, should have refueled long ago. But there were no operational stations, no services, just the shifting highway and the repeating mile markers and the abandoned gas station that existed in multiple timelines simultaneously. I made a decision born of desperation. At the next appearance of mile marker 47, I turned around and drove south back toward Elko, trying to escape the northbound trap. The highway resisted. Landmarks appeared ahead that should have been behind. Mile markers counted up when they should count down. I was driving south but traveling north, direction becoming meaningless, the highway orienting itself according to its needs rather than my intentions. The truck I'd been chasing appeared ahead of me again, still northbound, still maintaining impossible distance. How could it be ahead when I'd turned around? Unless direction was subjective here, unless north and south were labels the highway assigned arbitrarily. 8 hours into the nightmare, my GPS coordinates started showing decimal values that didn't make sense. Latitudes beyond possible range, longitudes that didn't exist on Earth. I was still on US 93, still in Nevada visually, but geographically I'd left the map, entered coordinates that corresponded to no location. The abandoned gas station appeared one final time, but different. It was pristine, newly constructed, circa 1950s, with a new sign advertising prices that were accurate for that era. And the attendant was there, young, alive, waving me in with urgent gestures. I stopped. I had no choice. My fuel was critical, my options exhausted. The attendant approached my window, his clothing from the wrong decade, his face showing no concern about the temporal displacement. "Fuel?" he asked cheerfully. "Yes, but how is this place operational?" "It's always operational. Time doesn't matter here. This station exists in all eras simultaneously. 1950s, 2020s, 2070s. You're seeing the version that corresponds to your entry point. For me, it's 1954, and you're a very strange-looking truck from the future." He started fueling my truck with equipment from 1950s technology that somehow connected to my modern tank. "You're on the moving highway. It shifts position to trap travelers, to keep them circling, to feed on their motion and uncertainty. The more you drive, the more it extends. The more you try to escape, the more it adapts. How do I get off? You don't. Not easily. The highway chose you. It will keep you moving until you're no longer useful." He finished fueling, replaced the nozzle. "My advice? Stop trying to reach a destination. Accept that you're in transit permanently. The highway will tolerate you if you accept its purpose." "What purpose?" "To exist, to move, to contain drivers who feed it with their travel. You're part of the highway now, Ms. Chen, a component of its system. It will show you different eras, different configurations, different versions of this route. But you'll always be on US 93 between Elko and Wells, driving forever, never arriving." He waved me forward. I drove away from the gas station, watching in my mirrors as it deteriorated, aged, became abandoned, then vanished. The highway stretched ahead, mile markers appearing in random order, landmarks shifting position, distance becoming elastic. I'm still driving. I don't know for how long. My GPS shows December 2nd, 2023, perpetually. My odometer continues accumulating miles. I've driven over 12,000 miles on a 50-mile stretch of highway. My fuel gauge stays near full, regenerating impossibly, keeping me mobile, keeping me trapped. The truck ahead is still there, maintaining distance. Sometimes I get close enough to see the driver, a man visible in his mirrors, driving eternally, never escaping. He's been here for 3 days, or 3 years, or 3 decades. Time doesn't resolve correctly on the moving highway. Other vehicles appear occasionally, always traveling the same direction as me, always maintaining impossible spacing, always trapped in the same loop. We're a convoy of drivers caught by the highway that moves when we're not looking. All of us circling the same 50 miles that extend infinitely. All of us feeding the system with our motion and desperation. The abandoned gas station appears regularly, sometimes derelict, sometimes operational, sometimes from eras I don't recognize, with technology that hasn't been invented yet. The attendant is always there, always offering fuel, always explaining that we're components of the highway's purpose now. I don't try to escape anymore. The highway extends when I try, adapts to prevent my exit, rearranges itself to keep me contained. I just drive, watching landmarks shift position in my mirrors, watching mile markers repeat in impossible patterns, watching reality restructure itself whenever I look away. US 93 between Elko and Wells is 50 miles. I've driven 12,000 miles on it and haven't reached Wells. The highway won't let me. It moves when I'm not looking, extends when I try to escape, feeds on my motion and uncertainty and desperate attempts to reach a destination that recedes faster than I can approach. The highway that moves when you're not looking is still moving. still shifting, still trapping drivers who think they're on a fixed route through known geography. And we're all still driving forever on a road that extends infinitely while never leaving a 50-mile stretch. Mile marker 47 is ahead, and behind, and beside me, all at once. I've learned to stop counting,